The Premier League is back. Well, I say it's back in like 3 weeks, but we are today, of course, going to be doing my Premier League predictions. We're going to go through all 20 teams, putting them in the place I think they're going to finish this season. Obviously, there are some controversial ones in here, so if you do disagree with any of them, let me know in the comment section. Also, we are trying to hit 1,000 subscribers on this channel, so if you do enjoy any of the content that you see, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Plenty more content coming your way, but let's get into my predictions. Starting off bottom of the list, we are going to go for Leicester City. They are losing Kieran Dewsbury-Hall, 14 goals, 12 assists. He was their talisman last season. To lose him is going to be a massive blow. I think that is underestimated, like how big an impact that is going to have on this Leicester side. With obviously the embargoes that they're going through in terms of financial fair play, probably not going to be able to get a replacement at the same calibre as well. So that's going to be a big blow. I think in the forward areas as well, they're really going to struggle. Obviously, they've got an aging Jamie Vardy. He'll still probably chip in with around 10, maybe 15 Premier League goals if they're lucky. But other than that, keeping him fit is going to be an issue. And I don't think the backups that they've got currently are good enough to keep them in the Premier League. Defensively as well, they are leaving a lot of questions unanswered. They were the second worst defence for goals conceded since, I think, maybe 2018, 2019. Out of the past 5 champions as well, they were second for that as well. So not a great defensive record to come up with. And I just think Vestergaard and Wout Faes are not Premier League quality. So all those factors combined and a potential points deduction, I think that means that Leicester are going to come rock bottom. 19th, we are going to go for Ipswich. I think, again, this one feels quite a lot like Luton last year, where there's a good vibe. It's great to have them in the Premier League, and they're definitely going to play some fluid attacking football. Kieran McKenna obviously has done a very, very impressive job at securing the back-to-back promotions, and they've got some very, very interesting players within that squad. Obviously, Leif Davis being the key standout, 18 assists for him last year in the Championship. It's going to be interesting to see how he progresses to that next level in the Premier League. For me, he feels quite a lot like Alfie Doherty last year, a really fun and exciting player to watch who will pick up plenty of plaudits and assists in the Premier League, but is he going to be good enough? And that defensive record that they showed last season, is that going to be enough to keep them in the Premier League? Probably not. I think some of the additions they've made as well, they seem like top level Championship players rather than Premier League players. Obviously getting Hutchinson back from Chelsea, I think that's a big plus, but then the other players they've signed so far, Liam Delap, Muric and Jacob Greaves, all for me feel like players that should belong in the Championship and don't really have a place in the Premier League. So I'm going with Ipswich at 19th. I think they're going to be a really fun and attacking side to watch, and will definitely put in some quality performances for the Premier League. But overall, I still think they're going to go down. And the final team to be relegated from the Premier League, I think it is going to be Southampton. So all the newly promoted sides are going to go straight back down. I think it just shows the gulfing quality between the Premier League and the Championship. And the main reason I think Southampton might go down is obviously a few factors. I think for me, they are probably looking the best out of all the newly promoted sides. I think Leicester losing Dewsbury-Hall is big. I don't think Ipswich's signings are good enough to keep them in the Premier League. But Southampton, I think, have got some really interesting players, and some of the players that they've been signing as well are really, really good quality. Ben Brereton Diaz was fantastic since joining Sheffield United in January. 7 goal involvements in 16 games for an already pretty much relegated and unmotivated side. That's really, really good numbers, so it's great to see him back in the Premier League. I think if they've got any chance of staying up, it is going to be all about Armstrong. Obviously, 47 goal involvements for him in the Championship last year. The last time he was in the Championship as well, absolutely smashed it, scoring over 20 Premier League goals. So he's definitely a natural goal scorer. The problem lies with his Premier League performance. Only 4 goals in 2 seasons within the Premier League. Obviously one of those years getting relegated with the Saints as well. So Premier League record, it's not that quite there. He seems like one of those players that could even make that transition like Dominic Solanke, like Mitrovic did a few seasons ago, where they've now stepped up to the mark where they're very, very good Premier League players, or he might remain at that level where he's just Championship level and just doesn't quite have the calibre. But for me, I think this is a really young and obviously impressive side as well. They've got kind of a manager who's set in his ways, which could be a good thing. It could be a bad thing, as we saw with Burnley last year, kind of sticking to the same style might not work for every single game. They like to dominate the ball, and that might potentially be one of their shortcomings. But like I said, if they have got any chance of staying up, it is all going to be dependent on Armstrong and if he can finish his dinner in the Premier League. Just missed out on the drop is going to be Everton. Obviously the problem for last season, and probably going to be the problem same again for this season, is going to be goals. They were the second lowest scoring team in the division last year, and I don't think things are going to change. They've still got Dominic Calvert-Lewin. He scored 7 goals and was their top scorer last season. Realistically, he is going to get injured at some point. He is just made out of Play-Doh. He's not going to make the full season. There will be spells where they don't have him. Obviously, they've just signed Ndai, who had a fantastic season 2 years ago in the Championship with Sheffield United, but out in France, he only managed to pick up 7 goal involvements in around 34 games, only scoring 4 goals. So he's not really proven at the top level. Championship level, yes, but top level for a team like Everton, they're absolutely desperate for goals, I don't think is going to be good enough for this level. The reason I've got them staying up and not going down is obviously it's Sean Dyche. His teams know how to defend. They know how to grind out results. He's just a master of shithouse, isn't he, to be honest? That's the best way to sum up Sean Dyche. Obviously a great defensive record for them last season in terms of clean sheets. And if they do manage to keep on hold of Branthwaite throughout the summer, I think they'll be fine purely off defensive record alone. But if they get injuries, maybe in that defensive area, the likes of Tarkowski, Pickford and Branthwaite pick up some injuries across the season, they could be in a really, really desperate position this season. So that's why for me, I've got them in that 17th place. 16th place is going to be Brentford. Obviously last year were riddled with injuries. I think one of the stats that I read was that Ethan Pinnock was out for 2 months, and during that period Brentford failed to win a game during that period. They also had injuries to Ben Mee, Rico Henry, obviously Ivan Toney was banned as well. So it's kind of a season of kind of a lot of chopping and changing with injuries and suspensions and stuff like that, and still managed to stay in the Premier League fairly comfortable. Obviously a data-driven, pragmatic side with a very nuanced manager as well. I think again they've got the tools and they've definitely got the capability to be staying up, and I think if they keep themselves injury free this season, defensively I think that positive record will return and they'll probably have enough to stay up from a defensive standpoint. Interestingly though, attacking wise it's all dependent on whether or not they lose Ivan Toney. Their new signing that they've just signed, Thiago, he's out for a couple months, so that's not a great start to the season. So you feel if they lose Toney, they might be more dependent on Visser and Mbeumo again to keep them up and keep the goals flowing while that guy returns to full fitness. But I think with more and more players coming back fully fit for this season, I think they've got the capability and the minerals to keep themselves in the Premier League. 15th place, we're going to go for Wolverhampton Wanderers. Obviously, Gary O'Neill did a stupendous job. Lopetegui leaving on the eve of the season, not really giving him any time to kind of prepare, went in and did a stellar job for me. However, there's quite a lot of uncertainty growing around Wolves with obviously their owner situation. There's also unhappiness amongst the fans with an increase in season ticket prices as well. So all of that kind of factored together, not really kind of any active movements in the transfer market either. I think it could be going into this season a little bit potentially unhappy, a lot of Wolves fans. And obviously, you know, with that does come speculation around relegation and obviously, you know, all the negatives that go with that as well. If you look towards the back end of last season as well, form was out of the window for Gary O'Neill's side. Only 1 win in their last 11 competitive matches. They completely fell away towards the back end of the season. So if they don't manage to kind of curve that kind of trajectory, they're going to be in for a dogfight. Their fixtures as well at the start of the season are really difficult as well. I think they're playing pretty much everybody in the top 6 within their opening kind of 10 games. So really difficult start for Gary O'Neill's side, but they do have some quality. Obviously Pedro Neto, Cunha as well, some quality that I think will be just enough to keep them up, but it wouldn't surprise me to see them get dragged into a relegation fight at points this season. Nottingham Forest are coming in at 14th in my predictions, and a lot of people actually have Forest going down. I think they're going to be completely fine. If you look at some of the data from last season, they were 4th for expected goals conceded in the entire Premier League. So I think the only teams they were behind were Arsenal, Manchester City and Liverpool. That shows how good their defensive numbers as well. Obviously, if you look at Nuno's kind of when he came into the club and their defensive numbers from that standpoint as well, really good data to suggest that. Obviously, they brought in a new centre-back from Lazio as well. They also brought in 6'8" Miguel, who might potentially play as well. I think this is all to kind of combat where they did concede a lot of goals. That was from set pieces, 22 set-piece goals conceded for them last season. You feel with these new additions, if they can eradicate that, keep up the strong defensive numbers that they put in last year, could potentially be pushing for a top half finish, in my opinion. I think, you know, those good records, they've got a manager who knows how to build experienced sides that can push on into European places as well. And they've got some really exciting attacking young talent as well to go with that. The likes of Alanga, Hudson-Odoi, and of course, Morgan Gibbs-White, who I think who has another good season this year, could be pushing for a top 6 club. 13th place, we are going to go for Fulham. The reason I've got them so low is I think losing Paulinho is going to be a massive blow. I'll put his FB ref per 90 stats and obviously the percentile he's in on screen right now for you guys to see. But this guy's stats are amazing. And if they don't sign a replacement for him or have somebody maybe ready-made already at the club, I think they could be in big danger. There's a reason Bayern Munich have signed him, and I think with that addition, they'll probably go on to win the league, because that was one of the areas where they struggled last season, breaking up the play. But as you can see, he's one of Europe's best players at that. So I think that's going to be a massive blow, especially if they don't find a decent replacement for him. Obviously, they are signing some other players though. Emil Smith-Rowe, I think, could be a great addition to an already kind of, you know, flourishing attacking line with plenty of mix of youth and experience with the likes of obviously Harry Wilson, Willian, who've kind of been around the block, but then you've got young Muniz, and adding Emil Smith-Rowe to that attacking lineup as well could be a really nice blend that I think will suit Marco Silva's kind of possession-based football as well. Obviously had quite a lot of injury records, so we're going to have to wait and see how he kind of fares, keeping himself fit for the rest of the season. But the reason I've got them so low, I think attacking-wise, they're going to be completely fine. Defensively though, I think missing Paulinho is going to be a huge blow for obviously any chance of European progression this season. West Ham United are going to come in 12th place. Obviously, Moyes' ball completely fell apart towards the back of his tenure as well. A lot of fans didn't want him there. There was obviously a sour feeling between him and the club itself. So I think getting rid of him probably was the right move. And if you look at XG conceded last year, they were 4th bottom for that. So obviously relegation kind of numbers that they were putting in, around the likes of Luton and Burnley and Sheffield United, who all did obviously relegate from the Premier League as well. So I think getting rid of Moyes was probably the right move. They brought in Max Kilman, a very experienced centre-back. I think he's done extremely well at Wolves over the past few seasons as well. So potentially could eradicate those defensive issues as well. For me though, I think they're losing a lot. I don't think they've got an out-and-out number 9. Obviously there's links with Fulkirk. I think he could be a great option for them. Obviously knows how to find the back of the net. Would suit their more direct approach as well that they're probably going to be playing this season under Lopetegui as well. But I think losing Paqueta potentially to a betting ban as well is going to be a big hindrance for their overall creativity. And realistically, I don't think Lopetegui is the same manager we all think and potentially could be, because at Wolves, I don't think he pulled up any kind of trees. Obviously, he's got a very impressive CV, winning the Europa League with Sevilla, but outside of that, the Premier League, his tenure in Wolves wasn't overly impressive. So I think he's got a lot to prove with a team that was obviously falling apart defensively last season as well. He's got to get that right first. And I think for me, realistically, needs a striker to complement Jarrod Bowen if they want to push on and kick into that top 10. 11th place, we are going to go for Brighton. I feel this one could be an interesting project this year. Obviously, it could go one of two ways. They've got a really young manager, the youngest in the Premier League at 31 years old. Just come off the back of winning the 2nd division in Germany, with St. Pauli. They had the best defensive record over there as well. So, you know, that was one of the main issues that Brighton had last season, was their defensive areas. They were very leaky at times with the system that De Zerbi had them playing in. So So you feel if he can bring that over, I think that's going to be a great thing. Obviously, he's still unknown to the Premier League and obviously quite new in terms of management as well. Only had 45 competitive games as a manager as well. So there's a lot for him to learn, and I think that's probably why Brighton will miss out on a top half finish. I think some of the other concerns I do have as well is losing Pascal Gross. I've never seen the man drop below a 7 performance. It just doesn't happen, especially against Manchester United as well. That's where he pulls out the 10 out of 10 performances. So they're probably glad, and United fans are probably glad to see the back of him. But for me, I think that's going to be a huge blow for them. He's been one of the best and probably most underrated Premier League players over the past few seasons. I think one of the big pluses though that Brighton have is they've got a lot of their kind of key players from 2 seasons ago coming back from long-term injuries, the likes of Matoma, Estupiñán, Solly March and Evan Ferguson as well. If they can keep those players fit, they're going to be in real contention to push on into that top half as well. So I think this season could be an interesting year of transition for Brighton, but if they can get it right, I think they're going to play some great football this year and hopefully sort those defensive issues out. Like I said, I've got them in 11th for now, but they could be one of those teams that breaks into that top 10. Coming in 10th place is going to be Bournemouth. I really like Bournemouth this year. I think they've got a great opportunity to go on and push into those European places. I think 10th is maybe a little bit underestimating their potential ability they've got. They very easily could go into the Europa Conference League or Europa League if they get things right and have really luck with injuries and stuff like that. Obviously, last season was Iriola's first season in the Premier League. It started off a little bit shaky. There was a long winless run at the start of the campaign, but by February, it pretty much looked like he got the system sorted out. Everybody knew what they're doing. By that point as well, and by the end of the season, they had scored the most goals from final third possessions won as well. So a really kind of, setting traps, high progressive team that are very exciting and interesting to watch as well. Obviously, you've got the key man, Dominic Solanke in there. He'll be another key to their success this season. 19 goals for him last season. I think, again, if he breaks that top 20 mark, I think he could be getting a move to a top 6 side as well. Ryan Christie as well was one of their most underrated players last season for, ball recoveries and stuff like that. Again, if he can keep himself fit, they've got some really young, interesting players as well throughout the side. I think these guys could be a really smart and interesting addition to maybe European football this year. But let me know what you think about Bournemouth in the comments section. Coming in 9th place, I'm going to go for Crystal Palace. Obviously, there's still a lot of moving parts with Crystal Palace, and they very easily could swap around with some of the other teams we've obviously spoken about, especially if they do lose some more of their top players, the likes of Eze, Mark Gahey potentially leaving as well. But I think it's a really good sign when obviously Bayern Munich are in for your manager. Had a really good season last year where he obviously picked up after kind of a little bit of doom and gloom around Roy, brought kind of a rejuvenated energy to that Palace side as well. And, they were one of the best and probably one of the most exciting teams to watch last year. Going with that as well, they had a very good defensive record. They were 5th for XG conceded last year. So again, combining the attacking fluidity with that strong defensive record as well, if they can continue that, into this season, I think they're going to be a real joy to watch. Obviously, the big concern is around the departure of Michael Olise. 16 goal involvements for him last year. It's now time for Eze to step up and be the main creator of this side. I think Saar is a very smart addition. If he can show any of the form that he showed back in Watford a few seasons ago, I think he could really complement that attacking line as well. I think Mateta potentially missing a few games at the start of the season with the Olympics as well might potentially cause a little bit of an issue for creativity going forward with the departure of Olise as well. But if they can hold on to both Eze and Mark Gahey and build on the strong kind of finish that they had last season, I think they very easily could be finishing 9th and maybe even a little bit higher. 8th place, and probably my first maybe controversial decision, I'm going to go for Chelsea. For me, it feels like they're back to square one. I feel towards the back end of last season, especially if you looked at the data side, XG conceded and XG created, it seemed like Pochettino was starting to get the best out of this side. I felt like Jackson was starting to come to the forefront. Obviously, Cole Palmer was immense last season, and he'll be a very key part of any kind of progression for this Chelsea side. 33 goal involvements for him, 1.2 goal involvements per 90 as well. I do imagine there's probably going to be a little bit of a drop off this season. Chelsea aren't going to win as many penalties as they did last year. But again, like I said, it just feels like they're in the same position as they were last summer, where it's a year again of transition. They're signing even more players to an already bloated squad as well. So for me, it just feels like they've taken 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But they are getting some players back from injury as well. Obviously, Reece James will be in the mix as he always is, but will probably get injured after 2 games because his hamstrings are made of cheese string. And Cuckoo, I think, could be a valuable player for them coming back this season. If he can kind of obviously show any of the form that he did for RB Leipzig in the Bundesliga, he could be an immense player and could feel like a new signing for this Chelsea side. 7th place, we're going to go for Manchester United. Now, this one is probably going to get me in quite a lot of hot water with United fans in the comment section. Now, this one, I think United could very easily fluctuate between 4th and 7th. Like, that's where this season could go. Obviously, last year, defensively, was shocking. Genuinely shocking. The 4th worst team for XG conceded last year. Huge defensive, obviously, improvements are needed from this side. Having Martinez back is going to be a big step in that direction. The new centre-back they've just signed, Yoro, though, has picked up an injury already. So, again, they're already going to be probably starting the season a little bit behind. It would have been nice if they could have got a pre-season together, built some kind of confidence as a partnership as well. So, already, I think they're already off to a bad start in that regard as well. They've obviously got a lot of improvements to make in that defensive area if they want to progress as a side as well. And I think going forward, they don't really excite me. Højlund and Xerxes, they don't feel like top 6 strikers. 21 league goals between the pair last season just doesn't really excite, does it? It doesn't get me off my seat. Obviously, they're 2 young players that can definitely grow in ability and start to obviously put up numbers that, you know, equate to top 6 strikers. I get it. But again, doesn't quite feel like it. But at the same time, off the pitch, I feel United have got a much better structure behind the scenes as well. Obviously, Jim has done some fantastic work building a kind of solid structure that I think will obviously come to fruition throughout the next few seasons. But this year, probably still going to be a year of transition, especially if they can't get those defensive numbers sorted out. And obviously, with a lot of young players around the squad as well, they're going to need time to bed in and develop as a side. But I think over the next few years, United will start to build their way back into top 4 and challenging for titles. But this season, probably going to be another season of maybe a little bit of disappointment. But, you know, if they can get things right, could push on to a European place. 6th place, we're going to go for Aston Villa, arguably one of the most interesting teams from last year. They did secure themselves top 4 football. Now, I think that could be a hindrance this season. Obviously, they did navigate European football last year, but there was a lot more kind of lesser opponents they were going up against. So you felt, you know, they could easily rotate in those games. Obviously, with Champions League football, there aren't going to be too many easy games, especially across the group stage, if they do want to progress and obviously get that big cheese as well that will help them obviously kick on to sign more exciting players next summer. So yeah, I feel that is obviously going to have a big impact. Also, injury-wise, last season, they were super unfortunate. They were riddled in injuries, and that's something, again, if that's going to happen, could really downplay their season as well. Towards the back end, they looked very leggy. They looked like they'd been through a very hard campaign, to be honest. And I think, you know, some of the players that they've signed definitely are going to bring some energy to that side as well. But one of the big misses for me is going to be Douglas Luiz. Huge blow. 9 goals for him last season. If you look at his FB ref numbers again, was absolutely phenomenal. One of my favourite players to watch in the Premier League last season. Like I said, for me, that feels like a huge blow. But they've added obviously some very good quality around that. I think bringing Ross Barkley back as well for 5 million feels like quite a smart addition. Will add some very much needed depth to this side as well with a bigger European campaign coming up. I feel there's potentially 1 or 2 more additions they need to make to this side to help them obviously push on for that top 4 football again. But for me, I think European football is going to hamper them a little bit and they very easily could drop down to 8th. But for now, I've got them in 6th place. In fifth place, I am going to go for Tottenham Hotspur. Obviously, last season, they started like a house on fire. They went unbeaten all the way up until November, and I imagine they're probably going to go on a very similar run to that as well. I think, obviously, towards the back end of the season, they were hampered with injuries and suspension. Their season completely collapsed after that point as well. So, obviously, again, they're going to have a fresh set of players going into the new season, but the high energy, obviously high pressing, Ange Postecoglou's system is going to take it out of the boys, and I definitely feel like they need some more additions to kind of avoid a future collapse a little bit later in the season. I think Archie Gray is a fantastic addition to kind of a little bit of a disjointed midfield last season. I think he'll provide some much needed rhythm, keep the kind of play ticking along, and if you've ever spoke to any Leeds fans about him, they love him. They rave about him. They think he's God's kind of gift, to be honest, to the footballing world, and hopefully can replicate that at the Premier League level as well. And when you've got clubs like Borussia Dortmund kind of sniffing around him as well, I think that kind of shows where, for me, you know, this lad potentially could be as well. So he could be a valuable asset, but I still feel like they need more bodies in the club to obviously combat European football and the high energy system that Ange wants to play. I think if they can get themselves Ivan Toney and maybe Eze as well, I think they could be in for a really, really good season. But I think they'll ultimately come short of top four football if they don't get any new additions into the side. Fourth place, we are going to go for Liverpool. Obviously a big season of transition, and this is something I've always said with football clubs, and it's kind of backed up in the 48 Laws of Power, if you've ever read this book. Law 41, avoid stepping into a great man's shoes. It's obviously a really, really good quote, and you see it throughout history. Whenever somebody kind of leaves a job where they've had a long tenure, done extremely well, the guy that steps in usually doesn't do that well. Obviously, football examples, you've got Alex Ferguson, you've obviously got Arsene Wenger as well. Their kind of, you know, successors have never really gone on to do anything at that club because the last guy built such a legacy, and the same thing feels very similar with Jurgen Klopp as well. So it's going to be interesting to see how that one goes, but, you know, just a little bit of kind of philosophy to go with your football predictions as well. I think the big problem that he's potentially going to have is obviously a lot of players did feature in the Euros and the Copa America as well, so potentially a little bit of lag towards the start of the season. But if you can get Darwin Núñez firing, that's the big question. Jurgen Klopp never seemed to kind of get him doing it, but his expected goal numbers are through the roof. If he can turn this guy into a 20-season striker, he really, really could be onto something as well. Obviously got Mohamed Salah, who still is banging in goals as well, but it does feel like it could be a year of transition for Liverpool. Van Dijk, Trent and Salah all with 1 year left on their deals as well. So for me, I think Liverpool could finish fourth, but if the other teams, kind of the Spurs, the Manchester Uniteds, the Chelseas, put in a little bit of a decent run, they very easily could replace Liverpool in this top four for me as well. So it feels like it's going to be a year of big transitions, so we're going to have to wait and see on Liverpool how they do, but they've still got lots of quality within that squad that I think will just help them cross the line into fourth place. Coming in at third place, and I think I'm going to put them as my dark horses for a potential title charge this season. It is going to be Newcastle United. Last year, Europe obviously took it out of them. This year, no European football. They've got a lot of players back from injuries as well, especially in the defensive area. They've also got Joel Linton back as well, and I think he complements Bruno Guimaraes' play so much. He's, for me, one of the most underrated midfielders in the Premier League. He just keeps things ticking along, and if you look at his minutes last season as well, was vital to Newcastle United within that midfield. I think getting Joel Linton back is going to be a big plus as well. They're getting the likes of Joe Willock back. Botman's going to be back. Obviously, they're going to have Pope back as well. All these players coming back from injury, I think it's going to massively help them. And arguably, they've got one of the best strikers in Europe up front at the moment. It is Alexander Isak. Obviously, he missed quite a lot of the season with injuries as well himself, but still managed to bag himself 20 Premier League goals last year and picked up 0.83 goals per 90. Ridiculous numbers from him. If they manage to keep hold of him and Anthony Gordon and continue to add some smart additions to the side, I really think with no European football, this team could be a right problem in the Premier League, and I've got them down as my dark horses for a potential Premier League title charge. Missing out on the Premier League, it is going to be Arsenal for me. I think the Gunners are just not quite got enough yet. Obviously, there's still room to manoeuvre in the transfer market. I think defensively, I'm going to say it. Raya won the Golden Glove last year. He's going to win it again. They've made amazing additions to that already strong back line as well, which will help obviously with European rotation as well. I think that's probably one of the areas that they did come a little bit unstuck with last season, around obviously, you know, rotating some of those defensive players around obviously some Champions League games and stuff like that. So I think with the additions that they've made, obviously having Yuri and Timber as well back from injury, I think will make a huge difference defensively. And again, I think they'll be top for clean sheets. Raya's going to win the Golden Glove. They were top for XG conceded last year, and they're probably going to be the exact same. The areas where I think they're probably just going to miss out, and it's very marginal, is going to be the goals. Now, Kai Havertz had a mightily impressive season last year, looked a rejuvenated player, but for me, him and Jesus as a strike pair, it doesn't scream Premier League champions to me. I feel like they just need somebody who is just going to purely bag goals and just offer a little bit of competition for those two as well. I just can't see it. Like, let me know if you disagree with that, but for me, I don't think either of these two are Premier League winning quality kind of forwards. Obviously, City have done it in the past, but it's Manchester City where they haven't had the best strikers. But for me, if they're going to go with that again, they've got to hope that the likes of Saka, Trossard, Martinelli and Odegaard all up their numbers for them just to kind of have them in the side and make up for them, in my opinion. I'm going to make a bold claim. I think Saka's going to have a little bit of a dip off this season. Struggled with injuries throughout that course of last season. Was kind of always rumoured to be, you know, maybe in the squad, maybe not in the squad. He realistically played like rain or shine, on crutches, in a wheelchair, always managed to feature in that side. I think with him not having a break over the summer, playing in the Euros, I think it's going to have a tremendous impact on his potential injuries and fitness this season. No real break for him, especially if Arteta wheels him out for game week 1 as well. I think could be a huge mistake, to be honest. They need to give Saka a little bit of time and offer him some rotation as well. Otherwise, I think he is going to, some point, maybe it could be this season, pick up a long-term injury, and when that happens, I think Arsenal are screwed from an attacking standpoint, especially if they don't bring in some quality. So for me, defensively, they're probably going to be the best team in the league this season. Offensively, there's still some work that needs to be done if they want to secure that Premier League title. And finally, your winners of the Premier League, I'm going to give it to Manchester City. I think they're going to do it. I think they're going to win yet another Premier League. I think the only thing that potentially could stop them is if obviously the Premier League gets involved and deducts them some points. That for me feels like the only way this formidable City side are not going to win another Premier League. You're going to have a fully fit KDB for the start of the season. He managed to pick up 14 goal involvements in 18 games last season. I think having him fully fit and available, fully focused as well, probably potentially going to be his last year in the Premier League as well. He'll want to go out with a bang. Obviously, you've got Phil Foden as well. He had a tremendous season and started to put himself into that world-class bracket that we've all known he's been very capable of over the past few years. And I think what you're going to get as well is a rest and recovered Erling Haaland. Now, I know he picked up a potential niggle in a pre-season game, but let's see how the season starts realistically. But for me, I think he's had the summer off. He's had time to recover from the issues that he had last season, where for me, he felt like he wasn't fully fit throughout the course of the season, but still managed to bag 27 goals. He's an absolute machine. Obviously, if he's fully fit for the start of the season, I think he could just go and smash it, to be honest. I think he'll probably get 30 goals. Like, I'm just going to say it. Fully fit Erling Haaland gets Manchester City 30 goals and wins them the Premier League. That's the difference between Arsenal and City at the moment. Defensively, City will probably still be up there for XG conceded, probably though not as good as Arsenal with their additions that they've made in defence. But covering off that, you've got Rodri. He is one of the best midfielders in the world, has to enter the conversation for Ballon d'Or this year as well, winning the Euros for Spain, having another successful season at Manchester City. And there was a reason that they were on that long unbeaten run with Rodri in the side, because he's just incredible. He is one of my favourite players to watch. Like I said, probably out there right now, the best midfielder in the world. So they've got the best midfielder, best forward in the world. They've arguably got, you know, two of the best creative players in Phil Foden and KDB as well. Defensively, they're really good. They're probably going to add one or two extra additions just to bolster that squad as well for the upcoming season as well. So for me, I just can't see past Manchester City as my Premier League champions. If you did enjoy today's video, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Like I said, there is plenty more content coming your way on the channel. There might be some more prediction videos. There's definitely going to be some kit videos, and there's definitely going to be some more interesting away day football videos. So hit that subscribe button for plenty more content coming. But thank you very much for watching today, ladies and gentlemen.